Hello, Dolphins fans. This is Aquavale here. Well, this was supposed to have already been uploaded, but I seem to have, had technical difficulties, and my audio was, not working. So we're doing this all over again now with a different shirt and hat on this time, which should be fun. Dolphins lost to the Colts. I've actually gotten like an extra hour and a half to soak in a little bit. Hear some of the other guys talk about it and like calm down a little bit from like when I did it originally, which was right after the game ended. Well, the Dolphins did lose 33-8 to the Indianapolis Colts. It was looking very much like it was going to come down to like a 33-0 loss, and almost at one point that it could have been even more. The Colts could have scored more. But the Dolphins did get a basically a pity touchdown, a garbage time touchdown, and got 2 point conversion with Tanner Connor, which was kind of interesting. I freaked out a little bit on that because it was kind of funny, and I was at that point I was in hysteria mode technically because it's just like, well, what am I gonna do? Just enjoy myself. But before I get really into the whole thing I was going to talk about with the Dolphins and the breakdown and whatnot, time of possession was 38 minutes to 21 minutes. Colts had 27 first downs compared to the Dolphins' 12. The total yards were 418 for the Colts and 211 for the Dolphins. Passing yards 262 for the Colts and 133 for the Dolphins. 156 rushing yards for the Colts and 78 for the Dolphins. Plays 70 for the Colts, 46 for the Dolphins, and yards per play 6 to 4.6, as well as a 3-0 turnover battle right there. The Dolphins came up really bad today. Now, while I get into that, I'm going to start with the offense and talk about that real quick, and then I'll go into the defense and then the injury stuff. First and foremost, this was a all three sided of the ball loss for the Dolphins. This was, I would not really say it was one side or the other. I think it was definitely a mixture of everything going wrong. The coaching staff was not doing a good job, like the calling plays, trying to challenge, using timeouts. It wasn't that good for the coaching staff. It kind of looked like it was still a preseason game for the coaching staff. Nothing was going right. Certain things that should have been challenged weren't challenged. They were making play calls that didn't really make any sense, but to be fair, at that by a certain point, what else are you going to call? So it wasn't really that great. They were kind of maybe rocking with like maybe like a D grade when it comes to like coaching because like to be fair, everything else was going wrong and you have to kind of like handle your business and try to figure it out, but they never were able to figure it out except for on one specific, actually technically two or three drives on defense they were able to kind of figure something out with the Colts, but not really the entire game, and the offense had like maybe one good drive and that's it. Offensively, the Dolphins were, to put in better words, a garbage pail. They were really bad. Offensively, they were not looking good. Starting with Tua Tagovailoa, Tua looked like the worst quarterback in the league right there for the first time in a long time. 2 interceptions and a fumble. Could have had 2 more picks on top of that, and actually possibly another fumble, possibly. It was not very good. He was making errant throws. He was not running around he was running around the pocket consistently and constantly. He was not protecting the ball very well at all. He looked lost. He looked rusty. He didn't look good. And that's a concern. He looked like he did after the first concussion when he came up a couple of years ago after the first concussion where he came out looking really good the game before, got concussed the next game, and then the game after that when he finally came back from the concussion, he was basically making errant throws and looked like absolutely he should never have came out of concussion protocol. He did not look good today. A lot of Tua haters are going to come in and basically bash the hell out of him. I already have seen some of the comments about it on like a media. Everyone's trashing Tua, they're trashing McDaniel, they're trashing Tyreek, they're trashing everybody. But specifically right now, I can kind of see where it's coming from for Tua. Tua just did not look good today. He was making not good decisions. He was not making any good decisions. He was not making throws that he usually would make. He looked bad. He looked off. like he got off the plane and just wasn't ready to be there. He looked like he was coming off of, an extended break of no practice. He looked like this was the first game he's ever played. It was not a good game for Tua. And that's the same thing going for the offensive line. The offensive line tried, but they weren't doing it. They were not pass blocking, they were not run blocking, they were not opening holes, they're not dealing with the defensive line. I am kind of disappointed in that. I was assuming that they were going to be better, healthier, and younger than they were last year, but all they were younger and more injured because, again, James Daniels was starting today. He wasn't supposed to, he was questionable, but he came in with an ankle injury, if I remember correctly, the injury chart and whatever. He came in injured and then left injured again. Now he has an injured pectoral, which is not good. But the entirety of the offensive line was not doing the assignment. Maybe because the Colts have a really good defensive line. Maybe, I don't know. I do know I learned from one of my other guys on Dolphins content that they do have a really good offensive line, which we'll get to that in a minute. But their defensive line was basically having their way with the Dolphins' offensive line. The Dolphins had an issue with running, as you could tell, only 78 yards. I do know that when it comes to the Dolphins, like our leading rusher had had 55 yards, and that was Devon Achane. 55 yards rushing, not a good stat for winning football, technically, to be honest. Other than that, they just weren't protecting the quarterback. They weren't giving Tua the time to be able to get the ball out of his hands. He was constantly pressured. He was constantly facing defenders coming at him. He was running around consistently, well, a lot of the times. And to be fair, they weren't able to move the ball. They also weren't able to run the ball or catch. They were having issues getting the ball to the receivers. They were having issues with the receivers getting open as well. And they were only focusing on Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle when trying to get the ball through the air. Sure, we got some throws to Tanner Conner. We got 2 receptions for 20 yards for him. But when you look at it, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and then the next is Devon Achane. That's not winning football. And sure, they weren't doing anything. Tua wasn't playing well, and the offense wasn't able to actually get through a rhythm. They were going basically 3 and out a lot and or turning the ball over. But you still got to try to get the ball to your other receivers. Malik Washington, Westbrook, and Akina, they could have more, catches. You could pass the ball over them. Get more throws to Tanner Conner. Maybe toss it to Alec Ingold, maybe, or get D. Eskridge going in there. They weren't doing that. And partially for that was, again, the offensive line and Tua missing throws. He was not on his A game today. So all in total, the offense was not playing good. It was not good at all. It was like a very embarrassing start for the offense, for a McDaniel-led, high, explosive, fast offense. Looked really, really slow, really sluggish, and really inaccurate. Just not a good showing for the Dolphins. As for the defense, that's where I was a bit more disappointed, especially on the defensive line and the linebacker core. The defensive line, I was expecting with all the big men on defense, we were going to be good. We're going to look good. We're going to look strong. We're going to push around an offensive line. I did learn after the fact that the Colts have probably a top 5, top 3 offensive line this year, or had a top 3 offensive line last year. I didn't know that. I went in assuming that they had a bad offensive line based on how well they did last year and what their quarterbacks were doing. Apparently I was wrong with that. They have really big men and their offensive line is apparently stout. But that doesn't mean that the Dolphins should have been beaten this way. The Colts offensive line was able to move our players however they wanted to. Bradley Chubb struggled. Jalen Phillips struggled. Chop Robinson struggled. Zach Sealer struggled. Zeke Biggers and Grant also struggled. They all struggled. Our linebackers coming in, Matt Judon and Dodson, they were also struggling as well with trying to do anything against this offensive line. They were not able to stop the run. They were not putting pressure on Daniel Jones enough. They only got 1 sack, I think, and that was it. Bradley Chubb got that. But they were running the ball all over the Dolphins. They were throwing the ball and getting receptions all over the Dolphins secondary and in front of the secondary. The defensive line wasn't able to do anything, wasn't game changing, did not do a single thing. It was kind of embarrassing and kind of sad because I wanted this defensive line to actually cause trouble and get to the quarterback and blow up the run. They did not do any of that. And when it came, because of that, the deficiencies we have at secondary were showing a little bit more. But to be fair, not as badly as everyone was going to think. The secondary was actually doing pretty decent. The safeties and the corners were doing pretty decent for most of it. A lot of it was bad tackles, and the Colts taking advantage of the Dolphins playing a little bit deeper and trying to keep everything in front of them. They were definitely putting the ball close to the line of scrimmage, playing in like just right behind the defensive line, mostly on the left and the right. They were keeping everything in front of them, but they weren't making the tackles. And because the run game was working with Jonathan Taylor, they were getting everything to work inside. That's when the outside and the deep ball started opening up, and they were starting to make more plays later in the game. Not only that, the Dolphins defense was getting tired because when you are out on the field for 38 minutes, you're going to be tired. This is one of those kind of games where the defensive line did not do enough to help the defensive secondary, and the offense of the team did not help the defense at all either. This is one of those kind of games, like I was saying, that when everything doesn't work, nothing will work. When the offense can't move, the defense gets tired, and the defense can't pressure, can't defend, can't do anything, and it's just going to run away with the game. This is a thing the Dolphins have done for about 2 decades now. Let's be real. Since Marino and Shula left, they've kind of had this kind of a problem where they will have multiple games throughout a season where the offense doesn't work, the defense is stout, but as soon as they start playing more and more, they get tireder and tireder, and they start messing up assignments and losing the games. I'm not going to put this loss on the defense per se. I do think it's an all-around bad game for the team. It's every unit had a problem, including the special teams unit was having problems with one getting an injury to D. Eskridge for the start of the thing and making him miss most of his bread and butter. And then, Matt Judon coming in and negating a good fourth down stop. And again, a good run after the catch. It was not a good day for the Dolphins, I will say. I am still kind of hopeful that the Dolphins will bounce back. I'm hoping that this is more of a fluke game. They come in and that they're tired, they're jet lagged, they're just not ready. They're thinking it's still preseason game number 4. I'm trying to be optimistic that they go into week 2 against New England and that they're going to be ready to go and be back to what they need to do. But I gotta say, like most people are, this was a very, very bad start, a very bad looking start. I've already said it too earlier that you can go right now, look at everything. Right here real quick. NFL fans want Shedeur Sanders traded to the Dolphins after Tua struggles versus Colts. Bleacher Report. Tua, Tyreek Hill, Dolphins ripped by NFL fans and blowout loss to Daniel Jones and the Dolphins. Grading Miami Dolphins for blowout loss to Indianapolis Colts. Warning, ugly report card. Tyreek Hill freaks out on the sideline. You can see where this is going right off the bat. Everything everyone was saying in the offseason is being brought back up again. Overreactions from week 1. Dolphins' worst team in NFL. This is what we're going to have to deal with for the next week. And I'm hoping this does not mold over and become the entire season for the Dolphins. I'm going to try to keep hope that next week they come in and they play better. I'm hoping this is the blueprint of this is what we should not be doing and we should be doing something else over here. I'm really hoping. So, yeah. With that, thank you for watching. If you like, leave a like. Dislike, leave a dislike. I want to see more, subscribe. All that nonsense. It was a bit disappointing. I'm going to keep being hopeful. But if you have any opinions on it, just let me know in the comments down below. If you agree, if you disagree, you're hopeful, you're not hopeful, just let me know. Do you think they're gonna fire McDaniel tonight, or do you think Tariq's gonna be calling for a trade? Like, to be fair, I'm thinking he's probably gonna do. Just let me know. Uh, like I said, I'm gonna try to be hopeful. I'll be back with the next video for the Dolphins content. I think either Friday or Saturday for the score prediction against the Patriots, and then I'll be on this channel from now on streaming the Dolphins games. So with that, thank you and goodbye.